I think in times of today, your largest tool is Gen AI. Not everybody knows how to use it right. AI tool is accessible, but it's not used in the right way. My earliest aspiration was to be a teacher. Teachers would get chocolates on every kid's birthday. For anybody who's 20, I'll tell them to pick up their phone and immediately book the health insurance policy. My parents preferred me to be an engineer. I still have my butterflies and my nervous jitters when I'm talking to a large audience. If everything has to be done by AI, what are we marketers doing? The art to manage time against timelines is what you will carry throughout your corporate career. The experience that I had before Great Lakes was a startup, and that has taught me almost 60% of my job. Motherhood is my second MBA. What it teaches me, nobody has. A little early to reveal, but
Hello everyone, welcome to Great Lakes Alumni Podcast session. So today we have here someone who have done many roles. She is a storyteller, a marketer, a writer, a mother, a leader, and whatnot. She started off her career in forces, and over years she traveled across different industries and centers, including Big Insurance, European, Aditya Birla Capital, and now clocked India. But more than that, she have brought a humility, heart, and a hustle to everything that she has done. From her childhood roots to her journey as a leader, and now balancing motherhood at boardroom, the story has nothing be short expired. Thank you, Neha, for coming here, and it has been my utter privilege and honor to have you host. So, before we get into your professional side, I would like to ask you about your childhood and early aspirations. So, in many ways, you have been through the journey that we have just started off, and you have stumbled across, you have learned a lot of things, you have figured out a lot of things. What do you think? What are some of the lessons or values that that from the Great Lakes Institute of Management you have able to capture and which continues to shape your approach towards your work life or your personal life?
thank you, Alina. Thank you for the kind introduction. So I've never had it figured it out. I'll be honest here because I have had a very different upbringing. My parents were very supportive. They both come from different cultural backgrounds, and that cultural diversity also reflects in our thoughts. Or, I've grown up in late 80s and the early 90s. That those are my schooling years, and we've seen different times. We've been without gadgets. Having said this, my earliest aspiration while I was probably in class 1 or class 2 was to be a teacher. Reasons teachers would get chocolates on every kid's birthday. That was my most humble desire to be a teacher. But obviously, careers or conversations evolve. Till until graduation, again, I wasn't very sure of what I should do. I was a good student academically. I would consistently be in the top 5. English and maths were my favorite subjects. English typically on the uh, writing, reading aspect. I've always loved doing it. I've always had a creative side to myself. But my parents preferred me to be an engineer. When I say this, this also comes from the fact that every odd person in my family you point out at is an engineer. So, default settings, if I can say, default settings applied, and I was asked to be an engineer. After my 10th standard, also, I picked up computer science in my vocational reasons because you can score better, you can get better percentages. We didn't really have many competitive exams back then. Our combination of physics, chem, and bio would act as qualifiers for engineering. And yes, we had the larger entrance exams, and that's how engineering happened to me. Even after doing my engineering, while I thought I can just pick up a job in a leading IT tech company and I should be fine, aspirations don't end there. I continued working for a long time. That's exactly when marketing happened to me. And I also had my exposures to marketing projects in Infosys. That's my first company. After that, there was no looking back. I continued to be in marketing. It took me a while to convince my parents that, okay, listen, I'm going to change paths. I'm going to now do a master's in marketing and strategy. I allowed for some few more years of work, and I came to Great Lakes to do my PGPM 1-year program. If you ask me from a marketing standpoint, your learning is not limited to what you do at school. You need to read every day, you need to learn every day. The industry evolves every month. I mean, earlier I would still say every 6 months, but now the industry evolves every month. So if you're not reading, if you're not updated with what's happening, in the market, or what trends are going on, or what is it that can be the next big thing, you're clearly lacking behind. So learning has to be a very central part of of your career, of your ambitions, followed by very strong desire to be consistent. Little efforts are fine, provided you're doing those little efforts every day. Put in those extra hours on some days, put in those lesser hours on some days, but put them together to help yourself first. And lastly, I think time management. What helps me manage the multiple roles that I do is time management. Again, I have not cracked it in one go. I have picked it as in when it has come to me. And I clearly plan my life one day at a time, not more.
Great answer, Neha. So, since you're from a tech background, even I'm from a tech background, so was it difficult for you to shift from a technical background to a management, or did this diverse background give you an edge towards marketing?
So it definitely gave me an edge. Because I did my engineering, I had that analytical thought process. I had a lot more understanding to projects. I have been involved in data projects throughout Infosys. I've done mostly maintenance projects. And you at least get a sense of how an entire journey or a project translates right from analysis to development and thereafter execution or maybe client requirements, right? So this gives you a bird's eye view to at least understanding what you're working on. Bundle that with everything that you do in your current role. Yes, you're able to see things differently. When I was doing my master's here, Facebook ads or maybe the Meta ecosystem had just begun. It was again the right time for all tech savvy people to now become martech players where they can infuse their knowledge of technology and actually build in stronger insights. So all your analysis today are driven by data analyzing platforms, and your Power BI tools, your analysis tools, everything that you pick up, even in terms of consumer surveys or research analytics, everything is based on numbers and analysis. So there are definitely some skills that you will always carry from your earlier education. I think the beauty lies in how and where you apply it.
So, do you think the world leaders today need to have both a mix of both technical side as well as a management side to enrich in this society, in this business world?
My view is that my engineering days taught me logical and analytical thinking. My master's program taught me how to manage time. I'm sure all of you, as students on the campus, are constantly pressed by multiple assignments or articles that you are completing day on day, and you are always against timelines. The art to manage time against timelines is what you will carry throughout your corporate career. Picking up things at the right time and carrying them with consistency will always differentiate you. Everything that you learn in your curriculum, yes, stays with you, but you have to also add in layers of soft skills such as time management, stakeholder management. How do you speak in a room full of uh, conversations where ideas are going left, right, center, and you're the one who's wanting to bring in clarity. So a lot of these soft skills actually augment your overall approach.
So basically, these kind of crossovers can define your career as well. Absolutely. So even throughout your journey, you the way you speak, you have the confidence, the strength in you, and everything. So I just wanted to ask you about the confidence. You have once mentioned that confidence isn't something that you're born with, but something that you have to build on. So how did you build on your confidence and own your voice? And being a woman, I think it's definitely tough for you. There have been tough situations where you have to speak up to raise your voice and everything. So how did you build on it?
So to be very honest, if you had to ask any of my friends or colleagues from my school days or from my early engineering days, they would have just picked one word to describe me: aggressive. I am not even half as what I used to be in terms of skills or even speaking out. A lot of it is to be attributed to the way my parents have brought me up. They've given us an equal ecosystem. They've allowed me, my brother, both of us to be equal in decisions, even in terms of gifts. So the little things contributed. My father always told me that irrespective of where you are, who you are with, you have to ensure that you're speaking up. Very, very small thing to say, but now that I look at it from where I am today, I realize that was a very powerful statement, because back at the back of my conversations, he would always be like, let me see who says what to you. I mean, this is very playfully said by a father to a daughter, but that makes me what I am today. By my personality, I'm an introvert. I have my struggles in talking to people, but the way you put yourself forward is important and you have to learn to do it. Like, I still have my butterflies and my nervous jitters when I'm talking to a large audience. I have emceed many events, but my first step on stage is always nervous. How you ace yourself once you're on the stage and how you continue in that constant zest or that passion of being in the moment, focused, aligned, not letting anybody bother you, no judgments having falter you. That is all in your mind. If you convey to yourself that you can do it, you'll be able to achieve it. It's okay to falter. It's just about going better the next time.
Since we are talking about finding your voice, you have been through traveled through different industries and sectors, and the way you have managed to carry your voice through different sectors is unremarkable, and it is not very easy for people to do that. So looking back, do you think that your growth was mainly based on the institutions that you were being part of, or the experiences that you carve yourself along the way?
To answer your question, yes, the institutions have played a good role, but a lot of it is to do with how you perceive it. I have also worked with startups where we've done groundwork. We've had a completely flat structure. In fact, the experience that I had before Great Lakes was a startup, and that has taught me almost 60% of my job in that 1.5 year. So, yes, institutions play an important role, but it also depends on how much of the opportunity you're able to make out of it. If you are saying no to a particular job for some reason of location or project, etc., don't do that. Try it out. At least attempt it and then come back to seeing if it works for you or not. Even if it doesn't work, remember there's a learning at the end of the day. There could be organizations where you deal with tough people, you deal with difficult clients. You can also meet colleagues who probably uh, are not aligned with your thought process. What are you learning at the end of the day? You're learning how to deal with people, and that's the biggest of all skills. The day you ace how to talk to people, or talk to people rather, maneuvering the situation, understanding what the ask is, that's when you will be able to compete very strongly in your area of work. Picking up learnings from where you are is important. A little thing that I do till date is I have a written diary that I maintain from all of my years of work. And those, not every day, but most days, I write down my learnings there. If there's an industry first, or if there is a news item that has appealed to me and I think it can work really well for me, I till date maintain them as notes. I'd love to digitize them, but courtesy my generation and life stage, I'm unable to put them on digital. But I still maintain that as my learning, and I'll call it gold. I mean, it's gold for me because if I have to look back to my early years, I can definitely pick up what has worked for me then, and I can quickly make my notes or maybe even share them with someone for their learnings.
So, Neha, since you've mentioned that you write diaries and learnings, so since before we had a conversation about your book that you're going to publish, so do you want to talk about that?
A little early to reveal, but I was here in Jan and I took a session on change management. A lot of my writing for the book is on change management, and it is nothing but changing the way you look at externalities, or I wouldn't call them problems, but I'll say as environments that probably challenge you, because many a times you do not realize that that was the best for you back then. In your current environment or situation, you'll think that why me, why not somebody else, and why am I facing this? It could have been a lot easier, but then what's written for you is anyway going to happen. So when you're done with that phase of your life, self reflect and understand what it has taught you or what it has left with you. That's your true evolution in terms of personality, in terms of you being you. And not everybody climbs fast on the ladder, not everybody reaches the highest point on the ladder. There is something that is meant for you, and while you are in this journey of learning, you will be at the right spot at the right time.
It's amazing. It's an interesting perspective. Brand Conclave, we are talking about building trust among the next generation consumers in the way of marketing. So, since do you think leaders like you who have traveled across different industries and sectors are better at adapting to the new expectations that the new customers are giving off?
Consumers and industries both will evolve. I started at a time where Orkut existed, Facebook was growing, and LinkedIn was there more from a internship or a job opportunity listing point of view. Ads did not exist then. 5 years later, the world was full of meta, paid ads, and there was so much performance marketing that was happening. My point to give this example is that the industry is anyway evolving. Now, if you see a consumer back then would have different choices, different life priorities, and would also possibly look at different products. You look at today's arena, I think every large brand is challenged by a startup in every category. There are so many avenues of selling. There's digital, there's omni, there is, people are creating communities to sell their items or services. There are proper shops that still continue to be in business. So avenues are always exploring. Just to give you an example from my learning, if you see the insurance industry, we're very proudly saying that India is the largest demographic. But while we say that we're the largest demographic, we're also the largest aging population. We will be the largest aging population soon. So you have to work on both arenas. You have to cater to them in terms of products that work for them. A health insurance product with maybe a diabetes or a cancer care add-on or even an obesity care add-on would not work for a youngster. I will have to talk to them with a health insurance product which is more comprehensive, more general, and probably applies to them even in terms of payment, right? They may want flexi payments. If I had to talk to someone who's on the aging side or maybe above 40, 45 years of age, I will have to look at these specialized care inclusions because healthcare costs are increasing and specialized healthcare costs specifically are on the constant growing side. So for them, my product communication would also be different and the way I talk to them from a product selling point of view would also be different. So consumers will exist and will have their, you know, asks being different across. Like 3 years ago, nobody knew there would be a category for curly hair women, right? And today you have a complete new category. You did not expect shampoos to come in the form of bars. And today we're doing away with bottles we're using, trying to be more sustainable and eco friendly. So there will be enough disruption that will come. It's about you studying the market constantly and understanding what your consumer is doing. The best part for a marketer's job is to be on the field selling that product or service. Take that experience for at least a few months before you write your next campaign.
So, in this competitive marketing sector, how can a marketer be set apart from the rest of the marketers in much more creative or different way?
I think in times of today, your largest tool is Gen AI. Not everybody knows how to use it right. AI tool is accessible, but it's not used in the right way because as of today, it's a bit unorganized. But another few years later, you will actually have governance bodies to manage how much of AI you're using at work because it'll give you responses based on the kind of data banks it has. It'll give you responses on the kind of prompts you've used to set context for your query. So a lot of it depends on how you query the AI tool. If you ace this or if you do these courses called ChatGPT prompts or AI prompt engineering, if you pick these courses now, you will definitely excel from most people in the area because this is a clear niche. Not everybody knows how to use it right. Not everybody knows how you can give in selective prompts and even create videos. So pick this as a very huge learning as like an edge over most other people you're competing with, and it'll definitely help you in the next few years because Gen AI is the next thing.
So, since you have mentioned about generative AI, there are a lot of brands that have put up ads completely based on AI. So, for example, there's a brand Coca Cola. So they've released an ad completely made out of AI, and it had different perspectives from the customers. So few people felt like it lacked emotion, and few people felt like it was a bold move. So where does its untapped potential lie in marketing?
So every campaign in marketing is not tried as many times. You can do a sample A/B or a pilot test and check, but you really do not know how the campaign unfolds. Now, the way the industry works, positive PR, negative PR, both is PR at the end of the day. Positive trolling, negative trolling, both are trolling at the end of the day. Yes, users responded differently, and rightfully so, right? Because it's a new environment. Not everybody would appreciate the reason or the purpose as to why that campaign was created. I understand it was facing backlash, but it's a new setup. It's a new campaign. Maybe future campaigns would turn out to be a little more positive because now people are more accustomed to seeing AI campaigns. We are for Locked In India. We launched last year. We did an AI generated campaign. It was new. It was the first for an insurance broker to do that. So it is new. Any new thing will be judged, and gradually there'll be slower acceptance, but there will be acceptance.
So, how can marketers ensure originality in a space which is overflowed with contents and crowded opinions?
That's where you need human intervention. If everything has to be done by AI, what are we marketers doing? The human aspect or the sentiment aspect that you carry as insights or as that raw truth that you want to work on as a touch point is best conveyed and carried by a human. AI tools can only augment our conversation. They can further support us. They can improvise us in terms of time, delivery, cost, efforts, yes. But if there isn't a person backing that campaign, you wouldn't be able to make the most to connect with your audience.
So, since you've mentioned about emotions, nostalgia plays an important role in marketing. And even in insurance, we can see ads where there's like family members, their loved ones, protecting their loved ones. So, how do you think the insurers can step it up by using nostalgia in a much more better way so that the new gen customers can really get attracted to these policies of insurance? So since young generations are their mindset is like they doesn't look forward to the future, they're living in the present. So how can you penetrate insurance to the new gen customers?
If you see the recent campaign by General Insurance Council, it focuses on non-life insurance, which is on Insurance Liya Kya. It's a fabulous campaign, connects very well with the audience. If you've seen the dog also moving around while his master is hospitalized, and there's a bit of a humorous take also, but it connects so well. The messaging is so real. So I think campaigns such as these, largely supported by all ecosystem providers, insurance companies, insurance brokers, surveyors, TPAs, everyone who form the part of the ecosystem, if all of us come together towards this as a joint cause, push the awareness layer, I think we can speak to all our audiences, including Gen Z.
Okay, amazing. Also, we have seen many insurance sectors like HDFC Ergo. They have introduced different policies altogether, like in 2025, like maternity riders and chronic radars. So, how do you communicate this kind of innovative approach towards the customers? Since insurance is a very complex sector and many people doesn't find it much interesting. So how do you communicate to these kind of customers?
So the art lies in smart communication. When we do campaigns for our corporate clients, we try and add in creative liberties. Very recently, we've done a campaign for a large tech corporate where we've simplified add-on conversations in comic strips. So we've pulled in a fun anecdote, bundled in a common situation, and we've given the insight saying that how top-ups are very cost-effective, probably as low as a cup of coffee per year. So we've used those methods to create that conversation to our audience. Any content format that is engaging works well. So you probably try out what works, but the idea is that you keep trying out different formats of content, at least 6 to 7 formats of touch points before your consumer actually comes back to you for purchase.
Pet insurance, which was introduced, I think, 4 to 5 years back. How do you think people will adopt it? Because even health insurance in India is under penetrating. So, will people buy these insurances on pet? Will they consider it as a luxurious policy?
Well, not really. I think product innovation will always happen. When COVID happened, there was COVID cover that came in. Later, it got bundled with health insurance. Similarly, for pet insurance, I'm sure there is an audience. That's why the product was launched. It wouldn't had there not been an audience, it wouldn't have got approved. Sure, the audience could be small, but there are requests that are coming in on that side, and innovation is needed because you also have pocket size insurance products such as your mobile insurance or your spectacle insurance. So these innovative products will keep coming in, to which is just find like a niche in the market where you can communicate or, speak differently.
While we look into different life stages, a person who is 55-year-old and a person who is 25-year-old will be talking in two different ways about insurance. So how would you communicate with these people of different life stages?
For anybody who's 20, I'll tell them to pick up their phone and immediately book the health insurance policy because premiums are directly proportional to their age. If you're under 25 years of age, your policy premium could be lesser than, it could easily be under 10,000 rupees. Again, this is just an average number, but the moment you cross the 40-year mark, that's when your premiums start increasing. And if you're at 55 and not covered, I think that's a big risk that you're wanting your family to be exposed to. So it's best in the interest of your family overall well-being that you take health insurance as early as possible.
So now we have said about like two different age groups, but even if two different person of same age, they have different responsibilities. So how do you approach these people? Like two people, yeah.
Underwriting basically means writing down the terminologies or the inclusions, exclusions of the health insurance product. Let's say the same person who's 25 years of age. Assume one of them has healthy eating, good lifestyle, uh, no bad habits, and no pre existing diseases. Most likely his health premium will fall in the average category. Now, contrast this with a person who's probably 25 years of age, working in extremely stressful environment, has some exposure to some habits. There is lifestyle inflation in terms of not exercising, eating outside, eating a lot of junk food, and possibly dealing with weight issues as well. Chances are his premium will always be on the higher side because, as lifestyle diseases in India are on the higher side. 1 out of every 8 person is prone to or most likely to get diabetic. So, with those numbers in, it is very likely that the second category of my audience would probably be on the risk side and his premiums could be higher. So, underwriting will typically assess all your demographic information. It will ask you all those questions and then come back to you with pricing.
So since you've mentioned about the lifestyle of the person is following, the diet they're following, and everything. So how do you get these datas? How trustable are these datas?
So, claims is the largest source. Product enrollment forms is the second source. Apart from this, there are regular surveys that we conduct, our counterparts conduct, and all of this information comes in as data which we further analyze using our tools, and we're able to publish some numbers which help us create actionable insights and thereafter support our campaign.
Okay, amazing, Neha. So, insurance is not just about buying and selling policy. Nowadays, it's about giving guidance, advices, and making people understand how financial terms work. So, how do you think the insurers can move on from just being buying and selling policy to being a partner whom the people can rely on?
We are already partners. In fact, I'll say most of us from the insurance ecosystem. If we are not partners to our consumers, they will not come back to us. Insurance is a annual renewal product. So if we do not engage with the customer throughout the year, chances are that during the time of renewal, he moves out to a competitor or goes out to explore other options. If we are talking to the consumer rightly throughout the year, through campaigns, through programs, through awareness drives, through webinars or any other touch point, the customer very well knows that I am concerned. I am looking after what his needs are, his or her needs are, and will come back to me with renewal because he's probably also had a service touch point. So consistency of service is obviously important. And while I talk to my consumer, I constantly need to also understand or maybe gauge his ask as to what it could go on. For example, if someone has picked up a motor vehicle very recently, maybe say fresh out of the job, has picked up his first car, chances are he may not have a term life. Can I also talk to him and upsell a term life? Yes, why not? Let's say the same person sets up a startup ecosystem. He has about 10 to 12 employees. Smaller setup, but those 10 to 12 employees also need a group medical health care. Can I talk to him for group medical health? Yes, I can. So all of these data analysis or, or behavior studies that I can perform on my consumer will help me plan what is the best product or what is it that I can offer him additionally beyond from the current product.
In one of your interviews, you have mentioned that your father played a major role in helping you out in your earnings, initial earnings and investments and etc. So, does that influence you in the way you communicate with your customers?
Yes and no both. When I say father has helped me, yes, I've picked up a lot of his insights, but I know he's also made bad insurance choices. So now that I'm on that side of the business, I know I can go back and correct those mistakes. So I pick them as interaction points, maybe. And if I've walked into a large corporate or if I'm sitting in these meetings, they just act as good conversation points. And ultimately, these insights or anything that I have experienced in my personal life can also act as, insightful study parameters for product innovation. So we utilize it at that scale.
So, since we're talking about parenthood, you are an amazing mother, and all the mothers sacrifices one or the other things. Maybe it can be the careers, their ambitions, or anything of such stuff. So, if you were to had a chance to do something or make a policy for the mothers out there in a work environment, is there anything that you would suggest?
I think we should coach women to create ecosystems around them. The good part about India is that we still live in joint family setups or we still have access to our parents in and around. Um, if we leverage our ecosystem, we can quickly pull a tab or we can quickly ask for someone to help us when we are not able to make it. This could also be your spouse, this could be your parents, your extended parents, or any close relative for that matter. Women must learn how they can leverage their current ecosystem for them to be able to work efficiently at work.
So great, Neha. So, if is there any skill that you got from motherhood that you are using in your professional life as well?
Motherhood is my second MBA. What it teaches me, nobody has, and nobody really prepares you for motherhood. Coming back to work after your maternity break is quite a change. It's quite daunting. I won't say it's easy. It's very difficult. And when you come back, that is exactly when you realize how much of extra time you whiled away in your earlier days. Having said this, my biggest and best tip to mothers is go one day at a time. You really do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. So ensure you've done your best today. Tomorrow will follow, but at least ensure that you're addressing today because only today is in your hand. You can't really control what's happening tomorrow.
So, Neha, before we come to the end of the session, I would like to ask you two questions. So, is there any advice that you want to give to the new marketers who are coming across? What would it be?
I think start grooming yourself on handling AI well. Like I know it's a good tool. You can get all your extra work done. It saves you time, but use it rightly, use it wisely, because there will be a governance body that will soon come in across marketing teams. Marketing teams overall will have to change and evolve to accommodate AI changes, and you will soon see the change where we'll all become communication owners and across the value chain of marketing you will see that difference soon. So embrace AI, learn it to your best capacity, use it for smart campaigns, use good prompts, invest in courses that can help you understand prompts and build on those skill sets because I think that's what the industry is looking forward to.
Also, if you have to leave a message for the brands that are building trust for the next generation, what would it be?
I think trust is a reflection of everything that you're doing for the consumer through all communications, through all touch points. And if your customer comes back to you with repeat purchases, that's your largest positive signal, which also means what you're doing is right. So continue the momentum. So I think consistency and authenticity will have brands be well received amongst consumers.
So, Neha, now we'll move on to the rapid fire session. So, your first question, one industry where AI will have biggest impact.
All industries, not one.
Okay. So if AI could take one task of forever, what would it be?
Content writing,
Wait, stronger teacher, motherhood, or boardroom?
motherhood,
Insurance in one word.
complicated.
Trust or tech, which wins first?
Trust, without trust, you can't win conversations.
Biggest myth about insurance customers.
That they will buy the product.
What makes Lockton unique?
Our independent thinking.
If time travel was possible, would there be a thing you would change?
Yes, I'll try to make most of my hours when I didn't have a lot of responsibilities.
Future of insurance, digital first or human first?
Already digital.
For Lockton, what is stronger focus, retention or expansion?
Your attention.
So as we come to the end of the session, her childhood dreams to her journey as a leader, and from balancing both motherhood as well as boardrooms, her journey has been nothing but inspiring story. So Neha, thank you for coming to the session. It was a pleasure and privilege to host you today, and thank you so much for being here and giving us your insights on your marketing, insurance, and your aspirations, everything, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Most welcome.